My name is Evan 32, and I've spent years building a life through code and careful saving. Then I discovered my credit card maxed out $29,000 missing just weeks before my birthday. My mother's voice still echoes, "The family needed it more than you." Instead of exploding with anger, I smiled. Sometimes, the most powerful response to betrayal isn't rage. It's a calculated lesson they'll never forget. Before I tell you what happened next, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button, and subscribe to join me on this wild journey. I grew up in a modest neighborhood in Boston where the winters were harsh, but the community was tight-knit. My childhood home was a small 3-bedroom colonial with faded blue paint and creaky wooden floors. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours, at least until my parents' marriage fell apart when I was 15. Dad left on a Tuesday. I remember because it was science fair day, and I'd spent weeks building a working model of a solar system. He didn't show up to see it. Instead, he packed his belongings into his sedan and drove away without a proper goodbye. The divorce papers arrived a week later. He moved to Arizona with his new girlfriend and started a fresh life, making sporadic phone calls that dwindled over time until they stopped altogether. Mom, Linda is her name, took it hard. She'd been a stay-at-home parent for most of her adult life, and suddenly she was thrust into the workforce with outdated skills and a growing resentment. She found employment as an administrative assistant at a local insurance company, but the pay barely covered our expenses. The financial strain showed in our gradually emptying refrigerator and the increasing frequency of bill sorting nights where she'd spread papers across the kitchen table and decide which payments could be delayed. "Evan, you'll understand when you're older," she'd say, whenever I questioned why the heat was turned so low in January or why we ate pasta 5 nights a week. "Sometimes you have to make sacrifices for family." That became her mantra over the years: sacrifices for family. Though, I noticed the sacrifices were rarely evenly distributed. I worked my way through high school at the local grocery store, bagging items and collecting shopping carts in the parking lot. By the time college applications rolled around, I knew financial aid would be my only ticket to higher education. I applied to every scholarship I could find, wrote countless essays, and eventually pieced together enough grants and loans to attend the state university. College wasn't the carefree experience my peers enjoyed. While they attended parties and joined clubs, I juggled classes with 2 part-time jobs. Mornings at the campus coffee shop, evenings doing tech support for the university's IT department, and weekends picking up freelance web design gigs. I survived on ramen and free pizza from club meetings I didn't have time to fully participate in. My computer science courses became my refuge. The logical world of programming made sense in ways human relationships often didn't. Code didn't have emotional needs or financial emergencies. It simply worked or it didn't. Problems had solutions if you were persistent enough to find them. I graduated with honors and $28,000 in student debt, but also with something valuable, marketable skills in a growing industry. My first job at a small tech startup paid modestly, but offered stock options and invaluable experience. I lived with 3 roommates in a cramped apartment, took public transportation everywhere, and put every spare dollar toward my loans. Within 5 years, I had climbed the ladder from junior programmer to senior software engineer at Blue Sky Tech, a respected company developing cloud security solutions. My salary tripled. The student loans disappeared. For the first time in my life, I had breathing room financial security that I had built through thousands of late nights and sacrificed weekends. Throughout these years, my relationship with my family evolved in complicated ways. Mom remarried when I was 27 to Roger, a charming car salesman with a quick smile and quicker spending habits. Their wedding was an elaborate affair that I largely funded, though this fact went unacknowledged in the speeches, thanking everyone who made this special day possible. My younger sister Melanie had followed a different path than mine. 3 semesters of community college led to a string of retail jobs she quit whenever they became too stressful. She moved back home after each failed attempt at independence, and Mom always welcomed her with open arms and open wallet. Melanie developed expensive tastes, designer handbags, weekly salon visits, and a new car she couldn't afford, all justified as networking necessities for the influencer career she was trying to launch. Roger brought his own financial complications. His business ventures required frequent capital that somehow never materialized into profits. One month it was flipping classic cars, the next investing in a friend's restaurant, then cryptocurrency trading. Each failure was blamed on bad timing or unscrupulous partners, never on his judgment. Among my relatives, only my cousin Jason seemed to understand the value of financial responsibility. He'd built a successful plumbing business through genuine hard work and careful growth. Our occasional beers together provided rare conversations where money wasn't a thinly veiled request. Last year, at 31, I achieved a milestone that filled me with quiet pride. I purchased my own apartment. Nothing extravagant, a one-bedroom condo in a decent neighborhood with large windows and a small balcony where I could grow herbs and enjoy morning coffee. It wasn't the square footage that mattered, but what it represented: stability I had created for myself, a foundation no one could take away. Or so I thought. The promotion to lead engineer came with a substantial raise and additional stock options. After years of focused work and cautious spending, I decided it was time for something special. My 32nd birthday was approaching, and I planned my dream trip: 2 weeks in Japan, exploring ancient temples, modern technology, and the culinary scene I'd researched extensively. I'd been studying Japanese in my sparse free time, practicing with language apps during my morning commute. The tickets were purchased, the itinerary meticulously planned, accommodations booked from Tokyo to Kyoto to Osaka. This wasn't just a vacation, it was a reward for the path I'd chosen and the discipline I'd maintained, a celebration of independence earned through persistence. I never imagined that my own family would try to steal it from me. 3 weeks before my birthday, Mom insisted on hosting a family dinner. Nothing special, she claimed, just quality time together. I arrived at 6 with a bottle of wine and fresh bread from the artisanal bakery near my apartment. The house, the same one I'd grown up in now, showing its age with peeling wallpaper and worn carpets, smelled of her signature lasagna. Melanie arrived 20 minutes late, making a dramatic entrance in new clothes I didn't recognize from previous visits. Roger was already 3 beers in, lounging in his recliner, watching sports highlights with unusual intensity. The atmosphere felt charged, though I couldn't immediately identify why. Dinner conversation started normally enough. Work updates, neighborhood gossip, comments about the unseasonably warm weather. Then almost imperceptibly, the tone shifted. "So Evan," Mom said, refilling her wine glass for the 3rd time, "that promotion must have come with a nice bump in pay." "Huh. Blue Sky's doing well these days, from what I read." I nodded, keeping my response vague. "It's comfortable. The company's in a good position." "Comfortable," Melanie repeated, rolling her eyes. "That's Evan speak for, I'm loaded but don't want to share details." I laughed it off, though her accuracy was unsettling. I'd learned to be private about my finances precisely because of conversations like this one. Roger muted the television and swiveled toward me. "Speaking of comfortable positions, I've been researching an opportunity that's practically guaranteed returns. High-end car restoration. Buy classic vehicles in rough shape, fix them up, flip them to collectors." His eyes had that gleam I'd come to recognize the beginning of a pitch. "Initial investment's steep, but the ROI is incredible. 20, maybe 30%, in 6 months." "Sounds interesting," I replied neutrally, "but I'm pretty conservative with investments. My portfolio's mostly index funds and blue chips." "Index funds," he scoffed. "Playing it safe never made anyone rich. This is the kind of opportunity that comes once in a lifetime." Mom joined in, her voice taking on that soft, persuasive tone she used when leading to a request. "Honey, you're so good with money. Always saving, always planning. It's admirable, but life is short. Wouldn't it be nice to help the whole family get ahead for once? Roger's done all the research." The implication hung heavy in the air. My money could solve their problems, if only I weren't so selfish with it. "I heard you booked some expensive trip," Melanie said, inspecting her manicure. "Japan. Right. Must be nice to blow thousands on yourself while Mom and Roger are struggling with the mortgage." I hadn't told them about Japan. I hadn't told anyone, except Jason. "It's not thousands," I lied, uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "Just a quick birthday getaway I've been saving for." "That's what credit cards are for," Melanie said with a laugh. "Live a little." Speaking of credit, Mom interjected, "What's your limit these days?" With your income and credit score, they must give you a pretty high ceiling. The question was so direct, so inappropriate, that I nearly choked on my water. I don't really keep track. I deflected. I pay the balance every month. Roger launched into a story about his friend, who leveraged credit to start a business, now supposedly worth millions. Throughout the meal, the conversation repeatedly circled back to money, who had it, who needed it, who deserved it. My finances were the unspoken centerpiece of the dinner. When I excused myself to use the bathroom, I left my jacket hanging on the chair. My wallet was in the inside pocket, where I always kept it. The bathroom was at the end of the hallway past my old bedroom, now converted to a home office cluttered with Roger's business paperwork. I washed my hands thoroughly, a habit from my coding days, and returned to find everyone exactly as I'd left them, perhaps too perfectly so. But my jacket seemed slightly askew on the chair back. Opening my wallet in the car later, everything appeared in place, but I couldn't shake a nagging feeling. The next morning I dismissed my suspicions as paranoia. These were my family members, not criminals. They might be financially irresponsible, but they wouldn't steal from me. Would they? The following days brought an unusual increase in family contact. Mom called daily with minor questions or to share trivial news. Melanie texted frequently, sending selfies and asking advice about jobs she wasn't seriously pursuing. Roger stopped by my apartment unannounced one evening, claiming he was in the neighborhood, though I lived nowhere near his usual haunts. During his visit, he asked to use my bathroom. He spent an unusually long time there for someone who claimed to just need a quick pit stop. Later, I noticed my desk drawer where I kept financial documents was closed slightly differently than I typically left it. A week after the family dinner, I received mail. I didn't recognize a credit card statement from a recently opened store account I hadn't applied for. I immediately called the company and discovered the application had been submitted online using my social security number and mother's maiden name as the security answer. Then came the first, small, unauthorized charges on my main credit card, nothing alarming initially. A gas station fill-up in my mother's neighborhood. A restaurant charge at a place Roger frequently mentioned. A clothing store purchase for an amount that matched Melanie's typical spending pattern. Each charge was small enough that many people might overlook them, especially someone with a healthy financial cushion. But I monitored my accounts carefully, another habit from years of tight budgeting. These transactions stood out like strangers in a family photo. Still, I hesitated to confront them. Perhaps there was an explanation. Perhaps I had absent-mindedly agreed to treat them to something and forgotten. Perhaps the alternative, that my own family was systematically stealing from me, was simply too painful to acknowledge. That willful blindness would cost me $29,000 and nearly shatter my trust forever. 7 days before my 32nd birthday, I sat at my kitchen island with morning coffee laptop open to my banking portal for the routine check I performed every payday. The familiar interface showed an unfamiliar sight. My credit card balance, normally paid in full each month, displayed an outstanding amount of $29,742. My coffee cup froze halfway to my mouth. This had to be a mistake. A banking glitch. A nightmare I'd wake from momentarily. I clicked into the transaction history, and reality crashed down, with each scrolling entry. $8,000 withdrawn as a cash advance at a casino ATM 30 miles away, where Roger had mentioned attending a business networking event. A $12,000 transfer labeled Emergency Family Fund to a new checking account I'd never opened. A used car dealership charge for $9,000, followed by a series of boutique clothing stores and high-end makeup retailers, Melanie's signature spending pattern. Smaller charges peppered throughout expensive restaurants, electronics, home furnishings. A complete looting of my credit, executed systematically over just 5 days. My hands trembled as I called the credit card company reporting the fraud, while a sick feeling grew in my stomach. The customer service representative asked the standard questions. Do you still have physical possession of your card? Any chance someone close to you might have access to your information? Any idea who could have done this? I ended the call with a promise to visit my local branch with identification and file a formal report. The representative had been kind but clear. Family fraud cases were complicated. Proving I hadn't authorized my mother to use my card would be difficult if she claimed otherwise. Still in shock, I drove to my mother's house. The familiar street looked alien now. The modest homes suddenly sinister with their drawn curtains and silent judgments. I parked haphazardly in the driveway and used my old key to enter without knocking. The house was quiet, except for the murmur of the television from the living room. I followed the sound to find my mother and Roger lounging on their new leather sofa. A sofa I hadn't seen before still, with price tags partially tucked beneath the cushions. Evan, Mom said, startled. "We weren't expecting you. Is everything okay?" Everything about her forced smile, her nervous glance at Roger, the way she subtly tried to hide her new bracelet beneath her sleeve, confirmed what I already knew. "Where is my credit card?" I asked, my voice unnaturally calm. A moment of tense silence followed. Roger suddenly became intensely interested in a loose thread on his shirt. Mom's expression cycled rapidly through confusion, innocence, and finally defiance. "I don't know what you're talking about," she attempted. $29,000, Mom. Casino withdrawals. A family emergency fund. Melanie's new car. Where is my physical credit card?" Roger stood abruptly. "I'll give you two some privacy," he mumbled, heading toward the kitchen. "You stay right there," I said, with enough authority that he actually complied. "This involves you too." Mom's demeanor changed completely. The pretense fell away, replaced by a righteous indignation that was both familiar and entirely alien. "Fine," she said. "You want to know where your precious credit card is? It's gone. We got rid of it after we were done." "Got rid of it how?" She waved dismissively toward the backyard. "Roger burned it in the fire pit. Can't leave evidence lying around." The casual way she referenced destroying evidence, like they were characters in a crime drama, rather than my family, made my blood run cold. Why? It was all I could manage. "Because the family needed it more than you did for your selfish trip." The words exploded from her years of resentment, packed into a single sentence. "You sit in your fancy apartment with your fancy job while we struggle to keep this house. You are going to blow thousands on Japan while your sister can't even afford reliable transportation to job interviews. What kind of son does that make you?" The twisted logic left me speechless. In her mind, my success obligated me to fund their lifestyle. My refusal to do so voluntarily had justified their theft. Roger found his courage now that Mom had broken the dam. "Look, it's not like you can't afford it. You make what, 6 figures? This is nothing to someone like you. And I've got a deal coming through next month that'll let me pay you back everything plus interest." "You stole from me," I said, struggling to process their rationalization. "You committed fraud." The back door slammed, and Melanie entered, freezing when she saw me. Her guilty expression shifted quickly to defiance, mirroring Mom's. "Oh good, the money police are here," she said, dropping her shopping bags unceremoniously. From my vantage point, I could see store logos that matched transactions on my account. "You bought a car with my stolen credit card," I said. She shrugged, avoiding eye contact. "I needed reliable transportation, like Mom said." "You've had it easy. Some of us actually struggle." "Easy," I repeated, incredulous. "I worked 30-hour weeks during college. I lived with roommates until last year. I packed lunches and took buses while building my career. Nothing about it was easy." "But you had opportunities," Mom interjected. "Your father's good genes, the right connections. Some of us weren't so lucky." The conversation devolved from there. My family, the people who should have been proudest of my hard-earned success, recast my achievements as undeserved privileges and my boundaries as selfish betrayals. They painted themselves as victims entitled to whatever I had built. "You owe us," Mom said finally, the statement hanging in the air like a verdict. For what I asked, genuinely wanting to understand their perspective, however warped. "For raising you," she replied without hesitation. "For the sacrifices. For being family." I looked around at these strangers, wearing my relatives' faces. Mom in her new jewelry, Roger, with a gleaming watch I recognized from luxury advertisements. Melanie surrounded by shopping bags while complaining about poverty. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. In that moment, I made a choice that would ultimately save both my finances and my self-respect. I nodded slowly, as if considering their position. I see your point, I lied, watching relief wash over their faces. The family does come first. They didn't notice my white-knuckled fists, or the careful neutrality of my tone. They heard what they wanted to hear, permission to continue exploiting me without consequence. I just wish you'd asked first, I added, injecting a note of hurt that appealed to Mom's need to see herself as the injured party. We knew you'd say no, Melanie said. You're always so uptight about money. I nodded again, the performance painful but necessary. I need some time to process this, and I'll have to figure out the credit card situation. As I left, Mom called after me. We're still on for your birthday dinner next week, right? I'm making your favorite cake. The casual expectation that we would celebrate together after what they'd done almost broke my composure. But I simply replied, wouldn't miss it, and walked to my car with measured steps. Only when I was miles away, parked in an empty supermarket lot, did I finally release the scream that had been building in my chest since seeing that credit card balance. Then, with hands still shaking but mind clearing, I made 3 phone calls to my bank, to a lawyer, and to cousin Jason. The real confrontation would wait until my birthday. They wanted a family celebration. I'd give them one they'd never forget. The week between discovering the theft and my birthday became a strange limbo of practical action and emotional paralysis. By day, I methodically documented evidence, spoke with fraud specialists, and researched my legal options. By night, I lay awake, dissecting every memory, questioning whether I'd ever truly known my family at all. My apartment, usually my sanctuary, felt contaminated by the knowledge that Roger had likely rifled through my personal documents during his bathroom visit. I found myself checking door locks twice, password-protecting files that never needed security before. Trust, once broken, creates ghosts in even the safest spaces. The financial logistics were straightforward if tedious. I froze the compromised credit account, filed fraud reports, submitted affidavits, and opened a case with the 3 major credit bureaus. The customer service representatives were professionally sympathetic, but their scripted responses couldn't address the unique betrayal of family theft. Would you like to press criminal charges against the unauthorized users? One bank officer asked, her expression carefully neutral. The question hit me with unexpected force. Criminal charges would mean potential jail time for my mother, sister, and stepfather. Despite everything, the image of Mom in handcuffs made my stomach turn. The entangled roots of family obligation ran deeper than I wanted to admit. I'm still considering my options, I replied, buying time. Alone in my apartment that evening, I poured a generous whiskey and began a painful excavation of the past. How many times had I ignored warning signs? How many emergencies had I funded? How many manipulative tactics had I excused as just how families are? There was the time Mom guilted me into paying for Melanie's community college tuition, which she abandoned mid-semester without returning the unused funds. The temporary loan to Roger for car repairs that morphed into a business investment and vanished without explanation. The countless dinners, bills, and gifts I'd provided while receiving criticism for not doing more. I'd been the family ATM for years, dispensing cash and emotional support while receiving little in return. The credit card theft wasn't an anomaly, it was an escalation of an established pattern. My phone buzzed with a text from Jason. Got time for a beer? Sounds like you need one. An hour later, we sat at a corner table in a quiet pub. Jason's steady presence had always been a counterweight to the chaos of our shared extended family. His straightforward nature and genuine concern were exactly what I needed. I wish I could say I'm surprised, he said, after I recounted what happened, but Aunt Linda pulled similar stunts with my dad before you were old enough to remember. Emptied his savings after Grandpa died, claiming she deserved more of the inheritance. Stole my mom's identity to open credit lines once too. The revelation shouldn't have shocked me, but it did. Why didn't anyone ever tell me? Jason shrugged. Family protects its own, even from necessary truths sometimes. After your dad left, everyone felt sorry for Aunt Linda, easier to enable than confront. I've been enabling them too, I admitted, but this crossed a line I can't ignore. What are you thinking of doing? I stared into my beer, articulating for the first time the plan forming in my mind. I need to break the cycle. Set boundaries with consequences they can't manipulate their way around. They'll fight it, Jason warned. They've built their lives around using others. People like that don't change easily. His words resonated with something I'd been avoiding, the possibility that my family might never become the supportive unit I'd longed for. That some relationships can't be salvaged, only managed. I know, I replied. But I have to try for myself, and maybe for them too. That night, sleep eluded me again. I found myself scrolling through old family photos, searching for clues I might have missed. Had Mom always had that calculating look behind her smile? Had Melanie's entitlement been cultivated or inborn? When exactly had Roger's charming confidence revealed itself as con man deception? Around 3 a.m, I opened my Japan itinerary, the dream trip, now financially impossible, and felt a wave of grief so intense it was physical. This wasn't just about money. It was about the freedom to build a life unconstrained by others' demands, to enjoy the fruits of my labor without shame. The panic attack hit without warning. My heart raced, breath shortened, and the room seemed to close in around me. Intellectually, I knew what was happening, but the physical experience was overwhelming. I slid to the floor, back against the wall, forcing air into resistant lungs. When the worst passed, I sat in the quiet darkness with a strange clarity. This reaction wasn't just about $29,000. It was my body rebelling against years of suppressed boundaries, of swallowing no to keep peace, of prioritizing others' needs at the expense of my own health. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years and scheduled an emergency session with a therapist I found through my company's assistance program. Dr. Catherine Wilson's office was minimal and calming, her approach direct but compassionate. Family financial abuse is more common than people realize, she explained after listening to my situation. The blood relationship makes the betrayal deeper, but also complicates the resolution. Most victims struggle with taking necessary protective actions because of ingrained loyalty. I don't want to destroy them, I admitted. But I can't continue like this. Those aren't the only options, she replied. There's a middle path, establishing firm boundaries with appropriate consequences. It's not punishment, it's self-preservation. We spent the hour exploring healthier family dynamics and identifying patterns from my childhood that had normalized exploitation. Dr. Wilson provided frameworks for assertive communication and resources for financial abuse survivors. I left with homework to define my non-negotiable boundaries and consequences for crossing them. The following days became a crash course in reclaiming personal power. I consulted with financial advisors about securing my accounts from future theft. I researched family psychology to understand the dysfunctional roles we'd all been playing. I practiced articulating boundaries without apologizing for having them. I also continued the charade of reconciliation. I texted Mom about birthday dinner preferences. I responded to Melanie's messages with artificial warmth. I answered Roger's calls about his newest investment scheme with feigned interest. Each interaction was a performance buying time until I could deliver consequences on my terms. The night before my birthday, I finalized my approach. I prepared documents, gathered evidence, and rehearsed key points. I secured a personal loan to replace the stolen funds for a rescheduled Japan trip, a decision that felt like reclaiming something vital rather than an additional financial burden. As I set my alarm, a text arrived from Mom. Can't wait to celebrate our special boy tomorrow. We have surprise gifts for you. The audacity was almost admirable. They had stolen thousands, destroyed my credit card, and still expected to play the role of loving family bearing gifts. The cognitive dissonance required was staggering. Or perhaps it was simply the entitled logic of those who view relationships as transactional opportunities. I placed my phone face down and closed my eyes, mentally preparing for the confrontation ahead. Tomorrow would change everything, for better or worse. The familiar knot of anxiety tightened in my chest, but alongside it grew something new, a quiet, steady resolve. For the first time in years, I slept deeply and without interruption. My birthday morning arrived with a barrage of fake well wishes. Mom called at precisely 8, her voice syrupy with affection, as if the theft had never happened. Happy birthday to my wonderful son. 32 years ago today, you made me the happiest woman in the world. I thanked her politely, maintaining the pretense. Melanie sent balloon emojis and a selfie captioned, Can't wait to celebrate you tonight. Roger texted awkward birthday wishes, with a gif of cash raining down an ironic choice given the circumstances. Their performance of normalcy might have been convincing if I hadn't seen the transactions, hadn't held the ashes of my burned credit card, hadn't heard their unapologetic justifications. The disconnect between their actions and their birthday cheer was surreal. I spent the morning executing the final elements of my plan. First, a visit to my bank to complete the fraud paperwork and establish new accounts with enhanced security features. Accounts my family couldn't access through shared history or security question knowledge. The banker, aware of my situation, added special notes to my profile requiring in-person identification for any significant changes. Unfortunately, we see this type of family fraud frequently, she confided. Most people never report it, much less take comprehensive protective measures. You're doing the right thing. Next, I met with attorney Michael Reynolds, who specialized in financial fraud and family law. His corner office projected the competence and discretion I needed. We've prepared 3 distinct documents, he explained, sliding folders across his desk. First, a formal repayment agreement with legally binding terms. Second, a cease and desist regarding any future use of your personal or financial information. Third, a conditional affidavit regarding the fraud that can be filed with authorities if the agreements are breached. And these will stand up if challenged, I asked. They're ironclad. We've included all evidence transaction records, your affidavit about the burned card, and the admission statements you recorded during your conversation at your mother's house. The recording had been a last-minute decision during my confrontation with them, legal in our state, which required only one-party consent. That small device in my pocket had captured their unfiltered admissions and justifications, providing evidence that would be difficult to dispute. I spent an hour with my therapist, afterward fortifying my resolve and rehearsing key phrases for the evening ahead. Dr. Wilson emphasized the importance of remaining calm, regardless of provocation. They may attempt to provoke an emotional reaction to shift focus from their actions to your response, she warned. Remember, this isn't about punishing them, it's about protecting yourself and establishing that actions have consequences. My final preparation took place at home, where I meticulously organized visual evidence of the fraud. I created a simple PowerPoint presentation showing the transactions, the credit impact on my score, and the projected financial consequences. I printed copies of everything, including photos of the backyard fire pit where my card had been destroyed. For a moment, standing in my living room, surrounded by evidence of betrayal, I questioned whether the confrontation was worth the potential family rupture. Then I remembered my sleepless nights, the panic attack, the stolen opportunity for my dream vacation. I thought of the years of subtle manipulation and financial drain. The pattern wouldn't stop without intervention. At 6:30, I arrived at Castellano's, an upscale Italian restaurant, where Mom had insisted we celebrate. The choice was telling. It was far beyond their legitimate financial means, but with the expectation that I would cover the bill, they had selected one of the most expensive venues in town. Even now, after everything, they were planning to spend more of my money. I requested a private dining area when making the reservation, ostensibly for a special birthday celebration. The manager led me to a secluded corner with a large round table well away from other diners. Perfect for what would unfold. My family arrived together 15 minutes late, their standard operating procedure. Mom carried a gift bag with tissue paper spilling out the top. Melanie wore new clothes that still had the crisp look of recent purchase. Roger brought a bottle of champagne that I recognized as a premium brand he couldn't afford on his legitimate income. "There's the birthday boy," Mom exclaimed, embracing me with theatrical affection. "You look tired, sweetie. Working too hard as usual." I accepted their hugs and birthday wishes, maintaining the facade while observing the subtle signals between them, the exchanged glances, the forced enthusiasm, the underlying tension. They knew what they had done, but believed they had successfully manipulated me into accepting it. "Let's order champagne," Roger suggested as we settled at the table. "Nothing but the best for Evan's big day." "I've taken care of it," I replied, nodding to the server, who approached with an ice bucket. "And I've pre-ordered a special menu for tonight. I wanted everything to be perfect." Their pleased expressions confirmed my understanding of their expectations that I would finance this elaborate celebration, despite their theft that my need for family approval would override any impulse towards self-protection. As the champagne was poured, Mom raised her glass. To Evan, the most successful member of our family. We're so proud of everything you've achieved. The irony wasn't lost on me. They were proud of my success primarily because it created resources they could exploit. Before we toast, I said I'd like to say something. I lifted my water glass, leaving the champagne untouched. Family is built on trust and mutual respect. Tonight is about re-establishing those foundations. Their smiles faltered, slightly uncertain of my meaning but unwilling to break character in this public setting. First, let's enjoy our meal, I continued smoothly. We have important things to discuss afterward. Dinner proceeded with strained small talk. They ordered the most expensive items: aged steaks, market-price seafood, top-shelf drinks, while I chose a simple pasta dish. Their conversation was peppered with hints about financial struggles, despite their obvious recent purchases. The property taxes this year are just killing us. Mom sighed between bites of her $40 lobster ravioli. My car's transmission is making that noise again. Melanie complained the keys to her newly purchased vehicle, visible in her purse. Roger launched into his newest business concept, a specialty coffee shop requiring just $15,000 to secure the perfect location. I nodded at appropriate intervals, while mentally noting the consistent theme groundwork for future financial requests, despite having just stolen $29,000 from me. As the server cleared our dinner plates, I excused myself briefly and spoke with the restaurant manager, confirming the final arrangements. Upon returning, I found Mom preparing to present her gift. "Open it," she urged, pushing the bag toward me. We all pitched in. Inside was a leather passport holder, with my initials embossed on the front, a cruelly ironic gift, given that they had effectively canceled my international trip by draining my funds. For your Japan adventure, Mom explained, either oblivious to or deliberately ignoring the contradiction. We know how much that trip means to you. The moment had arrived. I placed the passport holder carefully on the table and looked each family member in the eye before speaking. Thank you. This is actually perfect timing, as I want to discuss Japan and recent events. From my briefcase, I withdrew 3 identical folders and placed one before each family member. Their confused expressions shifted to alarm as I opened my laptop and turned the screen toward them, displaying the first slide of my presentation. A photo of the burned credit card remains alongside the transaction history. "What is this?" Mom asked. Though her expression revealed she already knew. "This is the beginning of accountability," I replied, my voice steady. "Please open your folders." The private dining room fell silent, except for the soft rustle of papers, as my family reluctantly opened their folders. I watched their expressions transform. Mom's practiced innocence crumbling into defensive anger. Roger's easy charm hardening into calculation. Melanie's perpetual victimhood deepening as she realized the scope of what I had prepared. Page 1 contains a complete record of the $29,742 stolen, using my credit and identity. I began, my voice calm but firm. Each transaction is categorized by date, amount, and which of you made the purchase. Roger cleared his throat. Now hold on, Evan. Stolen is a harsh word for what was essentially a family loan. A loan requires prior consent, I interrupted. What you did was fraud and theft, as defined by state law, and clearly outlined on page 2. They glanced down at the second document, a legal summary of the relevant statutes they had violated, complete with potential penalties. You wouldn't press charges against your own mother, Mom said, attempting to sound confident, but unable to mask her uncertainty. I would prefer not to, I acknowledged. Which brings us to page 3, the repayment agreement. The document detailed a monthly payment plan for each of them proportional to what they had taken. The terms were reasonable, extended over 3 years, with minimal interest, but non-negotiable and legally binding. This is ridiculous, Melanie scoffed, though I noted she continued reading the terms carefully. I can't afford these payments on my salary. You could return the car you purchased with my stolen funds, I suggested. That would reduce your obligations significantly. Her face flushed. I need that car for work. For the job you don't have, I asked quietly. Mom attempted a different approach, her eyes welling with calculated tears. Evan, sweetheart, I know you're upset, but we're family. Families support each other through tough times. Your father left us with nothing. You know how we've struggled. Dad left 27 years ago, Mom. I worked my way through college. I built my career from nothing. I've supported this family financially for years willingly when asked directly. But this, I tapped the transaction records. This crosses a line that can't be uncrossed. Roger Ever, the salesman, tried his pitch. Look, my new business venture is a sure thing. Once it takes off in a few months, I can pay you back double what we borrowed. Just tear up these papers and I'll make it worth your while. The agreements aren't negotiable, I stated flatly. They've already been filed with my attorney. Page 4 outlines the consequences of non-compliance. They turned to the final document, the conditional affidavit, that would trigger criminal charges if the repayment terms were breached. The room temperature seemed to drop as the reality of their situation sank in. You'd really send your own mother to jail over money? Mom asked, voice trembling. I'd hold my family accountable for theft and fraud, I corrected. Just as I'd expect to be held accountable for my actions. That's what respect looks like. Mom's demeanor shifted, suddenly tears vanishing, as she switched tactics. After everything I've done for you, I raised you alone. After your father abandoned us, I sacrificed everything for your future. One financial hiccup, and this is how you repay maternal devotion. By threatening legal action. I had anticipated this reaction. The martyrdom, the guilt manipulation, the reframing of their theft as my moral failing. Dr. Wilson had prepared me for exactly this emotional ambush. Taking my money without permission wasn't a hiccup, Mom. It was a deliberate violation of trust. And your response now attempting to make me feel guilty, rather than acknowledging the harm, demonstrates exactly why these formal agreements are necessary. We never thought you'd make such a big deal about it, Melanie muttered. That's precisely the problem, I replied. You believed you were entitled to take whatever you wanted from me without consequences. That ends tonight. I turned to my laptop and advanced to the next slide, a booking confirmation for a rescheduled trip to Japan. I've secured a personal loan to replace the stolen funds. I will be taking my birthday trip as planned, just delayed by 2 months. Your repayments will go toward clearing that loan. Roger's expression darkened. So you can afford a luxury vacation but claim you need every penny from us. That's hypocritical. The vacation was planned and budgeted for before you decided to steal from me. I explained patiently. I'm not denying myself something important because of your actions. That would be allowing the theft to accomplish its goal. I advanced to the final slide, a simple diagram showing automatic withdrawal authorizations from their accounts to mine. The repayment plan begins next month. I've arranged for direct transfers that don't require your monthly cooperation. The amounts are fixed, but reasonable, calculated based on your known income sources. You can't just take money from our accounts, Melanie protested. Actually, I can with your signed authorization, which is required before you leave tonight. Alternatively, we can proceed directly to option 2 criminal charges filed tomorrow morning. The ultimatum hung in the air. Mom was the first to respond, her voice cold with fury. You've clearly made your choice. Money over family. Your father would be proud. He always put himself first, too. The comparison stung, but I recognized it as a last-ditch attempt to regain emotional leverage. This isn't about choosing money over family. It's about establishing that family doesn't grant immunity from ethical behavior. I'm setting a boundary that should have existed all along. And if we refuse to sign, Roger challenged. I closed my laptop gently. Then I'll be at the police station when they open at 8 tomorrow. The choice is entirely yours. What followed was a 30-minute emotional hurricane: accusations, tears, threats, guilt trips, and finally begrudging acceptance. Mom signed first, her signature an angry scrawl across the page. Melanie followed with dramatic sighs. Roger attempted to modify the terms before realizing I wouldn't budge. With the signed documents secured in my briefcase, I signaled for the check. As expected, no one offered to contribute. I paid the substantial bill without comment, one final transaction under the old dynamic. "So this is it?" Mom asked, as we stood to leave. "You've turned a family into a business arrangement." I shook my head. "No, Mom. I've established that being family doesn't mean abandoning personal boundaries or ethical standards. If anything, it should mean holding ourselves to higher standards for those we love." "And you think we'll ever have a normal relationship after this?" Melanie challenged. "That depends entirely on whether you choose to respect boundaries going forward. I'm open to rebuilding trust over time, but it has to be earned, not demanded." We parted in the restaurant parking lot with stiff, uncomfortable goodbyes. As they drove away in their separate vehicles, one of which had been purchased with my stolen funds, I felt a complex mixture of emotions, relief, sadness, hope, uncertainty. The family dynamic that had defined my life for 32 years had fundamentally changed. Whether it would evolve into something healthier or dissolve entirely remained to be seen. But for the first time in my adult life, the terms of that relationship would include respect for my boundaries. I drove home under a sky scattered with stars, feeling lighter, despite the difficult evening. The confrontation hadn't brought joy, but it had delivered something more valuable: the reclamation of personal agency. The family lesson had been delivered. Whether they would learn from it was now up to them. 6 months after my 32nd birthday confrontation, I stood beneath the vermilion gates of Fushimi Inari Shrine in Kyoto, watching morning sunlight filter through thousands of torii that lined the mountain path. The moment felt surreal, not just because I was finally experiencing the Japan trip I'd planned, but because of how much had changed since discovering my family's betrayal. The path to this moment had been neither straight nor easy. The weeks following the restaurant confrontation brought expected challenges: angry phone calls from Mom, tearful accusations from Melanie, manipulative messages from Roger. Each attempted to re-establish the old dynamic, where my boundaries were optional and their needs paramount. I maintained steady, consistent responses, referring always to the agreements they had signed. When emotional appeals failed, they attempted practical sabotage, forgetting payment dates, claiming bank errors, proposing alternative arrangements that would have effectively nullified our agreement. The automatic withdrawals I'd established proved essential, removing their ability to use financial compliance as a monthly power struggle. Still, each transaction arrived with an accompanying text message, reminder of their resentment. "Mom, there goes my grocery money. Hope you're enjoying your savings account. Melanie just took my last $300. Thanks for caring about family. Roger could have turned that money into thousands if you'd invested with me. Your loss." I didn't respond to these messages, understanding they were hooks, designed to pull me back into dysfunctional patterns. Instead, I focused on rebuilding my life around healthier relationships and stronger boundaries. Cousin Jason became a steady presence, our occasional beers evolving into weekly gatherings, where we processed family dynamics with increasing clarity. Unlike my immediate family, Jason respected limits and reciprocated support. Aunt Linda called me last week. He mentioned one evening about 2 months after the confrontation. "Wanted me to talk some sense into you about the harsh repayment terms." And I asked, curious about his response. "Told her you were being more than fair, considering they could be facing criminal charges." He shrugged. She didn't like that much. I continued sessions with Dr. Wilson, working through the complex grief of family relationships transformed. There were moments of doubt and guilt, deeply ingrained responses to setting boundaries with people who had conditioned me to equate love with compliance. "You're mourning the family you wanted them to be," Dr. Wilson explained during a particularly difficult session. "It's important to acknowledge that loss, without abandoning the boundaries that protect you." Practically speaking, my financial recovery progressed steadily. The credit fraud alerts were eventually removed. My stolen funds gradually returned through the mandated payment plan. The personal loan for my rescheduled Japan trip became less burdensome with each passing month. More importantly, I developed robust financial safeguards. I established accounts at a different bank with enhanced security protocols. I implemented two-factor authentication for every financial portal. I enrolled in continuous credit monitoring services. I created a separate emergency fund that even I couldn't access without a waiting period. The most significant changes, however, weren't financial, but relational. I began cultivating friendships based on mutual respect rather than utility. I joined a rock climbing group where achievement was celebrated without envy. I dated briefly, nothing serious yet, but interactions where no was accepted without manipulation and generosity offered without exploitation. These healthy connections highlighted how abnormal my family dynamics had been. The contrast between relationships based on respect versus those built on obligation became increasingly stark. 3 months after the confrontation, my family's communication patterns began to shift. The angry texts gradually decreased. Mom's calls became less frequent but more civil. Melanie got a legitimate job as an administrative assistant and mentioned it without asking for money. Roger's investment schemes weren't mentioned in our limited interactions. Whether this represented genuine growth or merely tactical adjustment remained unclear, but I welcomed the reduced toxicity regardless of its motivation. 4 months. In an unexpected development, Mom called to ask if she could visit, not at my apartment, but at a neutral coffee shop of my choosing. The conversation that followed wasn't transformative, but it contained something novel, an acknowledgement. "I still think you overreacted," she began predictably, "but I shouldn't have taken your card without asking. That crossed a line." It wasn't a full apology, but from someone who had never admitted wrongdoing in my lifetime, it represented a seismic shift. I accepted the partial acknowledgement without demanding more, recognizing it as a small step on a very long road. 5 months after the confrontation, Melanie paid her portion early, not substantially, just $200, but accompanied by a text that didn't contain guilt or accusations, extra from overtime. Figured I should put it toward what I owe. Progress arrived in these small moments, these tiny adjustments to long-standing patterns. I measured success not by dramatic transformations, but by the gradual establishment of healthier interaction styles. Now standing in Japan among ancient shrine gates, I felt the distance, both geographical and emotional, providing valuable perspective. The family that had shaped me for better and worse was evolving into something different. Not perfect, probably never ideal, but possibly something sustainable. That evening, in my Kyoto hotel room, I received an email from Mom, containing something I'd never expected. A genuine apology not just for the credit card theft, but for years of financial manipulation and boundary violations. "Therapy is helping me see patterns I've repeated since my own childhood," she wrote. "I can't undo what I did, but I'm working to understand why I did it. I hope someday you can forgive me, but I respect that forgiveness must be earned, not demanded." I read the message several times, searching for the manipulative hook hidden within the contrition. Finding none, I allowed myself to feel cautious hope, not for an immediate restoration of trust, but for the possibility of eventually building something authentic from the ashes of what had burned away. The journey ahead would be long. Trust once shattered doesn't mend quickly or completely, but boundaries consistently maintained create space for new growth. My family was learning, however, reluctantly, that relationships function best with mutual respect. I was learning that protecting yourself can ultimately be the most loving action for everyone involved. As the Japanese sunset painted the sky in brilliant orange and purple, I reflected on the strange path that had led me here. My family's betrayal had nearly destroyed my dream trip, but ultimately it had given me something more valuable: the courage to define my own worth and demand that others respect it. That lesson, painful, necessary, transformative, was perhaps the most valuable birthday gift I could have received. Not one I would have chosen, but one that would shape every relationship moving forward. A gift not of currency, but of clarity. What about you? Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with people you love? How did you balance compassion with self-protection? Drop your stories in the comments. And if this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need permission to protect their own boundaries. Thank you for joining me on this journey of healing and growth. Remember, sometimes the most loving thing we can do for ourselves and others is to stand firmly in our truth and require that it be respected.